What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here, NJ.com, here with Mike Kaye at Lincoln Financial Field. The Eagles just lost 21-17 to the Panthers. Sorry, we'll get right into it, but I mean that was just an embarrassing loss, to be honest. They were up 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. They lost 21-17. They had a drive at the end. They had a chance to score. Carson Wentz had a couple of bad decisions, and he ended up fumbling in on fourth down. They lost. The defense wore down. I mean, this is kind of indicative of everything that's happened this season, but this is kind of all the bad things coming to a head at once, really, it felt like. In the fourth quarter. The first three quarters, I was like, man, maybe this is the Eagles team of old.
Yeah, sorry, I had to take a pause before that, because I know what's going to come out of this. People are going to talk about how the defense let them down. Chris Long said as much. The Eagles were moving the ball within the 20s so well, but for Carson Wentz to complete 81% of his passes, Zach Ertz to have 9 catches for 138 yards, Alshon Jeffrey to have 7 catches for 88 yards, and they only come up with 17 points, that's pathetic. That's an underscored issue this entire season. They have not been able to score with consistency at all. And you and I have talked about it before. You can't put that much on the defense. Eventually, they're going to break. The whole second half, I spoke to several players in the locker room who said, we felt like we were on the field on defense a lot longer in the second half than we were on the first. You know why? Because you were. This is not an offense like last year that could get out to leads and then the defense coasts. It's just not that same team. You don't have your top 2 defensive tackles next to Fletcher Cox. You don't have your starting free safety who apparently was a secret MVP for this team. You don't have Patrick Robinson, who's a crafty veteran.
Bo Allen.
Allen. Like, you are missing so much of the makeup of last year's team. Enough already. Let's stop talking about Super Bowl. Because right now, this is a team that doesn't know what it is. But I can tell you what it is. It's not a team that has a sustainable offense. And that is a problem.
Yeah, it's funny. They've only lost. I think all of their games, even their wins, besides the Giants game, have been within, I think, single digits.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, you can't just say, okay, they're a few plays away from being undefeated. Well, the reality is, if they were good enough to win those games, they would have won them. There's 7-game sample size now.
They're not playing the bulk of their tough season either.
Yeah, and it's just. At a certain point, this kind of happens in all sports. If a team loses close repeatedly, you're like, oh, they're right there, so they're going to be fine. The reality is there's a reason why they're losing close. It's because they're not good enough to win those games. And I think we're 7 games in. They're 3-4. All the same problems they had in week 1 they have right now. They just look a little better while they're doing it. Like, they look a little better with Carson Wentz than Nick Foles, obviously. Carson Wentz was amazing for most of the night. But they just aren't finishing drives. It doesn't seem like, I don't know, like Jake Elliott's missing field goals now when he was making most of them. I mean, he would miss his short ones last year and make his long ones. He made a longer one tonight, but he still missed a field goal that he should have made. Like, it's just like all these little things, and I think those little things, as you mentioned, that you had those guys like Patrick Robinson and even like a guy like Torrey Smith. He
Smith made a huge play.
That's what I'm saying. He struggled last year, but he also made some big plays in the playoffs. Like, they don't have guys who are stepping up like that in between, the cracks, the guys that you don't focus on as much. They didn't do a good. I think it's about time we started criticizing Howie Roseman for this offseason. I think we've had enough games where. Almost all. Michael Bennett has been the one that paid off the most, but he's a backup defensive end, and that wasn't a position of need necessarily. That was a good, shrewd trade, but all these other guys were either coming off injuries on the downswing of their career, and there's a reason why they were willing to sign 1-year deals for a cheap deal. Haloti Ngata, I don't know if he's going to play again this year at this rate. He's 35 and he has a calf issue. Darren Sproles, why'd they bring him back? I don't get it.
There were a lot of feel-good signings.
They waited until the last minute to sign Corey Graham when they clearly needed somebody better in the second year. Like, they rested on their laurels a little too much this year, and maybe they got cocky. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think it's fair to criticize the way they approached building the roster for the season. They kind of just assumed everything that was good last year could just carry over because they had Carson Wentz and they had the core guys, but they didn't fill out the in between the roster well enough. And the Wendell Smallwood's been a nice surprise this season, but he led the team with like 30 rushing yards tonight. Mm-hmm. Like the rushing attack, that's not the reason why they lost, but it contributed. Like, they weren't gaining yards rushing the ball, and the offensive line has not been as good. And I don't know, there's just like a lot of problems this team has, and I think it's about time everybody stopped being in denial about it.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer that when you have a bad draft or like a not very successful draft, you don't pay for it the first year, you pay for it the second year. Derek Barnett, great pick in my opinion. The rest of that draft is absolutely forgettable, and Corey Clement is only a role player as an undrafted free agent. You look at the Carson draft. Carson, A+, slam dunk. Outside of that,
Yeah, who else was in that draft even? I can't
Big
remember.
V, Isaac Seumalo. I mean, granted, you had to invest in Carson. And
Yeah, you had to give up a lot of picks, and that impacts it, yeah.
But you look at that. You look at free agency. You and I have talked about it several times. Bo Allen, Patrick Robinson. If those two guys are here, is this a completely different squad on defense? On offense, people ragged on Torrey Smith. Torrey Smith made 2 really impressive plays in this game that the Eagles haven't had a play of that ilk in any of these games. They haven't had Alshon Jeffrey had a nice broken tackle catch early in the game.
He was great in the first half.
He was. Here's the thing. It's cool when your superstars are playing well, but when nobody else is doing anything else, you're not going to win games. And that's what this game came down to. Zach Ertz looked like an all-pro and a potential future Hall of Famer. Alshon Jeffrey's out here playing out of his mind. Carson Wentz is throwing 81%, but no one else is doing anything else. And that is a massive issue for a team that really is struggling to find an identity. I thought they actually had more identity with Nick Foles at times than they did with Carson Wentz. They knew what they wanted to do because they knew what Nick Foles' limitations were. Carson, it's like, yeah, he can get them out of any jam. He's their Johnny on the spot. Carson's playing well. He's just not playing well enough to carry this team. It's just not, it's one of those things. He threw to 2 wide receivers today. Nelson Aguilar had a few catches for 20 yards. Like, that's not going to do it. They have no one outside of Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. And Nelson Aguilar can't break free because he's seeing attention. Because if you take Alshon and Zach Ertz out of the game, they can't do anything. I mean, this offense can't work. Or if you let Alshon and Zach beat you, you don't have to worry about anybody else. And I think, we'll get into this a little bit more later in the week before we go to London, but they need someone. I don't know they need another receiving option. Dallas Goedert is so good, but he's not allowed to, you've got these secondary players like Goddard and Aguilar who are seeing regular attention from a safety or what have you, where they're not breaking out because there's only 2 guys on offense that scare you. If you can get that third guy can open stuff up. Yeah, sure, the running game was putrid today. I thought the offensive line actually played relatively well, all things considered. But, Corey Clement, you're going to come out here and say, and everyone knows, I'm the biggest mark for Corey Clement there is, but 6 yards on 8 carries? That's just not going to work. I think Wendell Smallwood, like you said, has really taken a next step up. I feel really confident about the 2 of these guys moving forward next year as complementary
as
pieces.
your 2 and 3 running back.
Right. Like Wendell Smallwood, I'm on the verge of signing him to a 1-year extension, having him in, knowing that I have those 2 guys in this committee for 2 more years, and then signing another running back or drafting a running back, knowing that I have a foundation here, because we see running backs are so easy to replace, but they're also so easy to have, to lose their momentum. And so I think you've got your 2 and 3. I don't know what you have in your 1. I think Corey Clement can develop into something major, but right now he's not that guy.
And everybody's going to point to the fact that they need to make a trade. The reality is, if you're at the trade deadline and your season's reliant on you fixing your roster on one trade, like that, the odds of that trades don't happen very often in the NFL anyway. And the odds of you finding a guy who's going to step in right away and fill exactly what this team needs, even if unless they get Le'Veon Bell, who hasn't played at all this season, and I don't think they're going to get him. There's not a guy that's on the market that in reality is going to step in and fix their problems.
And it might not even be worth it, because if the guy gives you a 10,
they need 4 guys at 4 different positions.
Right. If you're let's say they lose to the Jaguars, which at that point you're like, all hell is broken loose after the way they played today. Cody Kessler, shouts to you.
Yeah, I wonder if he starts.
I do too. I'm a huge fan of his.
We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about it later. Here's the thing. If you're let's say they lose to the Jaguars, and then the trade deadline's the 30th. You're 3-5.
Still within striking distance of the division, technically.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go on a momentum swing,
yeah.
because you're not playing any division teams.
Exactly.
Like, that's like the one benefit.
They have 5 division games left.
That's the one where you're like, well, I know the new Halloween movie is another remake, but it's not being handled by Rob Zombie, so you're cool with it. It's one of those things. With that said, if you're 3-5, is it worth it to trade? I mean, because you're
trading assets when you clearly your roster, like the guy you're going to trade for, odds are he's not under contract after this year,
right? Or you're basically giving up a 3rd-round pick to win the division when you probably can't win on the road.
Yeah, you have to win on the road. You have to win on the road to get to the Super Bowl. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it's like you're kind of you're not going to punt on the season. Obviously,
Yeah.
I think this team will contend for the NFC title game until the NFC East division title until the cows come home. But does that mean that they can win it? You bring up a great point. If your team needs all these needs, or if the team's relying on that for a turnaround, that's probably not a great situation. You look at what happened last year. People will point to Jai. This team was good.
They didn't need him.
He pushed them over the edge.
Yeah, that was the thing. It's to make it a good team great. This would be making an average team above average.
I don't even know if I think they're just mediocre. I know mediocre is like another way
average,
of saying
mediocre, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But like, who's even like out of the guys like Devontae Parker? Really think he's?
I like Devontae Parker a lot, but
whether or not you like him, like
the huge if is if he's healthy. You look at a guy like...
Well, that's why these guys are available, though. It's
right.
Either the team's terrible or it's a guy who has fallen out of favor.
The one guy... There's 2 guys that I really like that we could talk about before we move on. I like Aaron Connolly. I loved him at Ohio State. But I don't know if he makes that much of a difference at corner. That's more of a long-term ad. Emmanuel Sanders. If they could land Emmanuel Sanders, this offense is so much more dynamic because his deep threat speed, his reliable hands... But apparently the Broncos
by the sounds of it, they don't want to trade him. Yeah, they want to trade Demaryius Thomas, who I wouldn't trade for.
Touch Demaryius Thomas.
But okay, let's break down this game a little more instead of talking big picture.
Right. So I want to talk to you before when we as we're transitioning to that. I want to talk to you about how frustrated I was doing the grades today because, like, as the fourth, you get an idea of what you want to do. This team played so well for 3 quarters.
It was like 2 different games.
Right. But here's the thing: you have 3 quarters and you have 1 quarter, and the 1 quarter decides the game. The problem is, the safeties played really well. Really well. Like, I had them as an A going into
Malcolm was dominant for most of the game.
Malcolm's the best player on this defense outside of Fletcher Cox. It's not even. I mean, it's those 2, and then like it's a bunch of dudes. The corners played really well up until the 4th quarter. The linebackers played really well.
Jordan Hicks, man.
I talked to a couple of guys in the locker room, and they were praising the defense in the second half, and then they just fell apart. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's the problem of signing these older guys that we talk about, but Michael Bennett, he's a first-quarter MVP.
Man, and then he just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he just kind of...
He's like literally the best defensive end. He looks like the best defensive end they have in the first quarter every week.
Well, and I'm going to start calling for Josh Sweat to get more snaps because
or to at least like get so these guys aren't tired at the end.
Right.
They can deny that they're tired, but there's something to it. You can't be that dominant for the first half and fall apart that much on long drives in the 4th quarter unless you're not in shape.
Trayvon Hester was fantastic in this game for the first 3 quarters. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but it was just not.
Bruce Hector had a half a sack with Brandon Graham.
Yeah, I mean that guy has a lot of potential. There's a reason why you read about an undrafted free agent in week 3 like I did. On top of that, so let's go to the offense because I you know what, the defense, like, it's hard to judge them and really give them grades because all of them got B's or better because of their first 3 quarters. It's like you and I have talked to Duke Manyweather a couple of times. He's the offensive line coach that worked with Lane Johnson. He always says that the offensive line is a macro position. But with micro results, it makes you look like if you give up 1 sack,
that's all anybody focuses
on.
Yeah.
With the defense in this game, it's going to feel like that. Oh, I can't believe the defense is playing off. I already got 2 text messages from Paul.
Your boy Paul.
Paul. So, like, keep that in mind. This defense played really well for 3 quarters. I'm not saying give them a pass, but take each quarter for what it's worth.
Yeah,
Let's talk to offense.
We can start with offensive line since you talked about that. They had a pretty good game. I thought they gave up 4 sacks and looks like 5 quarterback hits, but I think most of that was like very late in the game.
Yeah, and I thought Carson held the ball.
Yeah, Carson. I mean, that last drive was We'll get into Carson in a minute. We'll
that's not his best work. Talking about.
But offensive line, I mean, pretty good. I mean, there was a couple plays where Isaac Seumalo and even Jason Peters was like they were running out and they looked like they had their athleticism and speed, and that's kind of like when the offensive line is at its best is when those guys are able to run out to the flat when they have a screen pass, and they look really good, especially early. I think Seumalo has kind of established himself like he's going to be a part of this offensive line, at least right now.
Here's the thing. We've talked about it before. Really, really good in the run game, really good on screens. He has one or two plays every single game as a pass protector where you're like, oh my God, now I totally understand why they kept this guy on the bench last year. You know what I mean? So that's something to watch forward, but I agree with you. I think he's established he's better than was new.
Peters was better than he had been this season. Mm-hmm. He had to take a little break before halftime, but I mean, if he has to do that for one series before halftime every week, then that's fine, I guess.
Well, see, it's not.
Yeah,
it
maybe
really
not.
is not. If you want to really criticize Howie Roseman, this left tackle position is
problematic.
I don't know if you're going to move Lane Johnson next year. I don't think it really matters. The right side.
But then you still have to fill the right side.
Well, you don't want to get a little bit better at one position to make another position worse. They have to draft a left tackle in the first 3 picks. I mean, and then they might even still need a sign.
But if you usually, unless it's a guy that's like top 10, like a tackle isn't ready to play right away. That's one of the tougher positions to adjust the NFL.
Sure. Well, they're going to still have to sign.
So that's why maybe you do the veteran and 1 year stopgap for a rookie or whatever.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe Sam
or you decide if Mailata is that guy down the line. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean he was active.
But they're gonna have to sign or trade for somebody because it's not going to be Peters. And it shouldn't be Vaitai.
Good teams don't trade. I mean, teams don't trade good offensive linemen.
That's the thing. So and guys usually sign extensions too. There's occasionally guys that are free agents, but it winds up being like Nate Solder, who isn't good.
Right.
But
yeah, let's move to the tight end position because
Zack Ertz.
If we're going to talk about a positive position, they have the best tight end group in the league.
I think Zack Ertz has a case as the best tight end in the NFL right now.
I think he might be one of the top 10 receivers in the league.
He's on pace right now. Before this game, he was on pace for statistics. I think it was like 128 catches for like 1,400 receiving yards. Only 4. It's only happened 4 other times in NFL history, and it was from wide receivers each of those times.
Yeah,
projections are projections. Like it usually doesn't come out that way, but he catches everything that's thrown his way. He's adjusting to the ball. Him and Carson Wentz just are like firing on all cylinders right now, and he's unstoppable. And the Panthers did a pretty good job of not letting him get open on that last drive because I think they wanted to hit him. Carson Wentz. I mean, we're going to talk about it like we said, but the play that was an interception in air quotes was
that was an interception, by the way.
I mean, it was close, but it was aimed for Zack Ertz. It wasn't even close to him. He catches anything that's close to him generally. So
yeah, I mean, you talk about development. I mean, Ertz had some problems with drops early on in his career. He wasn't a good blocker. He had mental mistakes. This guy does not make mental mistakes that often anymore. He's sure-handed. He and Alshon Jeffrey are the reason why they got down the field. But speaking of tight ends, I wanted to talk about Dallas Goedert because
he looked good.
Wow, that screen for 21 yards. Woo!
I think I overheard you at one point saying this, and I was talking about it with another reporter as well. It's like his body type and like the way he moves like looks so much like Zack Ertz that
it's
like
hard.
And their numbers are like so similar with 86 and 88 like from far away. They're so often I'm like, was that Zack Ertz or Dallas? Like that's a great sign.
I'll do one. Do you want even further? I thought it was Jordan Matthews that caught that touchdown.
That's disrespectful.
No, I mean, well, Elliott didn't jump out of his seat, but look. This tight end group is something to build on, and I'm guaranteeing you Howie thought to himself, well, we'll just run a lot of 12 personnel. That'll be our cure for wide receivers. And in some games it has. The Colts game, he was essentially their number 3 wide receiver. But look, like I said, when all your great players are doing well, terrific. But you're not going to win a lot of games like that because they expect that's what your expectation should be because they are great players. You need other people to step up. And what I think has been very frustrating for on defense, I think Avonte Maddox has played well. I think Rasul Douglas when he's been in
the obvious guys have played well.
Camus has played well. Hester and Hector. But on offense, who has stepped up other than Wendell Smallwood? That you wouldn't like. Who's like exceeded?
And even he's playing his very best, and he's still. He's not doing amazing.
Yeah,
he's a good role
player.
So, I mean, you're right. I mean, outside of the main guys, Nelson Aguilar hasn't had a good game probably since week 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, no, he had. I would give him a good game for the Giants game, but that was after because he had those two heady plays.
He's taking a step back though.
He has. There's no doubt. But teams are also preparing for him, so whatever.
But they're also preparing for all the other guys they have on
I don't
offense,
even notice Jordan Matthews anymore, unless it's Dallas Goedert, who I think.
I mean, he seems likely on the way out once Mac Hollins or Mike Wallace comes back.
Look, here's the thing. I don't think either one of those guys is the solution.
I don't think they're a solution. I'm just saying Jordan Matthews isn't going to be around here that much longer.
Fair. Your best friend.
Whether there's a solution is another discussion. But
right. I mean, maybe Mac Hollins is a guy that comes off IR. We haven't seen him in a while.
I mean, he hasn't given any evidence to believe that he can come in and be like a guy for them.
Well, yeah, you don't not trade for a guy because of Mac Hollins.
Yeah.
But Mike Wallace was a bit of a disappointment his 2 games.
I mean, he didn't have any catch. He had like 1 catch in the preseason. After this game, it feels increasingly obvious that maybe wide receiver is a position that we haven't talked about enough that they need. Because we focus a lot on they need defensive depth more than anything, but they need a receiver who can impact the offense.
Well, and that's why I like Parker, because even if Parker doesn't give you a lot of opportunity this year, maybe if he plays well enough, you sign him to a team-friendly extension for the long term. That's how they have to look. This is not like a one-year rental trade market for the Eagles team. They have to know that they're getting rid of a bunch of guys. Yeah, they're going to have a lot of rookies. They need to have some established guys. So if you're looking at the trade market, look for guys that have at least 2 years left on this year and next year on their contract. So that's what I would say. Now let's talk about running back. Speaking of the trade deadline, what do you got?
I mean, I have to take the L in this one because I've been. I mean, you have all season, but the last 2 weeks I've written stuff about Corey Clement and how I think he deserves to be like the guy here.
Some of the best stuff you've ever read. I mean, written.
I mean, I really liked my story I wrote the other day, but it's pretty clear that he isn't at that point yet. Maybe he gets to that point at some time. Teams have clearly just know how to defend him. He doesn't quite have the burst of like a quick backhand that can get out of perilous situations when the blocking and the holes aren't there. And he just had a bad game. I forget you said his numbers. I forget what they were today. It was like 8 carries for 6 yards or something.
Yeah, and I think he had a fumble too that Carson Wentz had to scoop up.
He was 8 for 6, and I think he had a pretty good catch early in the game where he got 11 yards.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. They can still win with these running backs, I think, if they fix everything else. But they should get another. You've talked about this, like just a guy that complements the other two. They don't need to get a star. They don't even need to get a Jai level player. I don't think they just need to get somebody who's really fast or somebody who's really strong, like somebody who's really good at a skill, and then you can have this like trio of backs. And maybe they seem to still they're talking to us like they're confident Sproles can help them. They would have put him on IR if they didn't believe that. So I don't believe that, but they do. So you add another guy. You have Sproles as your pass catcher. You have Corey Clement as your short yardage guy, and you have Wendell Smallwood doing a little bit of everything. And then you get another guy who's either really fast or can get the tough yardage like a LeGarrette Blount or something. They just need something like that because I don't know, something needs to change. They need a shot in the arm. We say that every week. Maybe a shot in the arm's not enough. They need a bunch of shots of adrenaline to get this thing going. But
this team here's where you criticize Howie. This team has mismanaged this roster in season. I mean, at one point they had 6 wide receivers, 5 running backs active, 3 active quarterbacks, 10 active offensive linemen. Your defense is falling into the muck of terrible depth. They did nothing. They finally do something. Some of these kids step up, but it's too late. I mean, this is a team that's lacking an identity and lacking any week-to-week planning. Maybe they're planning for the long term, but from a week-to-week standpoint, it's very confusing some of the roster choices this team has made. Darren Sproles, God bless him, but he is old, and I saw him. I walked by him in back. I want to say backstage, but I walked by him today. Seemed fine, but what are you getting out of him that changes the dynamic of this entire offense? That's the thing. I think that's why people are so frustrated, and that's why people want to make a move for running back, because you have this hope that Darren Sproles can be an answer, or you're in our camp where it's like, well, what's the point? Darren Sproles is not like a long-term producer for you. He's not going to be the guy at running back. He just can't be. And so where do you go from here?
where we go from here is I think it's time to talk about Carson Wentz. For 3 quarters, he looked amazing. His final numbers, if you didn't know what happened on that last drive, 30 of 37. I believe that's his highest completion percentage of his career, 81%. 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 310 passing yards. He was like threading the needle. Some of the placement he had on the throws to Alshon and Zack were just unreal. He had a great throw to Dallas Goedert. Like he looked. I was ready to write his MVP campaign. Like I thought he looked like they were on the en route to win this game, which would have catapulted them to the rest of the season on a very winnable rest of their schedule. I mean, he keeps getting more and more passing yards. He's on pace to have like a ridiculous stat line, but in that last drive, he was just making some weird decisions.
He looked like a rookie.
Like the throw was pretty good on the pass interference play that was deep down the field to Jeffrey.
Oh yeah, that's a touchdown.
Like that would so the pass interference made sense and put them all the way down the field. They were deep in. They had over a minute to go, and then on his first play, like you have time. You don't need to do this. On the first play, he just like lobs it up in Zach Ertz's like kind of direction, but it wasn't anywhere near him. And I think it was Eric. Was it Eric Reed?
Yeah,
it was Eric Reed. Intercepted it in air quotes, and they said it was an incomplete pass. But like that was just a bad. You can see it on Carson, the way Carson reacted. Like he thought like he just lost the game for them, which he would have. And then he didn't look much better on the next couple of plays after that.
The third down play, as a spectator, frustrated me because Jeffrey was that one? Jeffrey, the throw to Jeffrey that was incomplete. He was almost like triple covered in the end zone.
Yeah, and he just kind of threw it.
And I don't understand why you don't try to just get the 2 yards. Like, just get the 2 yards. Because then you're setting yourself for 4th and 2, and you don't have... I mean, the Wendell Smallwood should have been like a, hey, we're bouncing back, the 8-yard run. I think it's poor play management by Doug, and I think it was poor play focus by Carson, and I think
who had made all good decisions the whole day.
Yeah, he spoke to the media after the game talking about the 4th and 2. He said that he saw Alshon Jeffrey come open late, and just as he was stepping up, Kyle Love knocked the ball out of his hands. Great play by him. But there's times where Carson will freeze. I don't know if you've noticed it recently. He is so aware of his accuracy that he wants to be more accurate, that he'll take unnecessary sacks, or he'll hold on to the ball for too long and throw late. Like, that's a problem. That's his one issue. And I think, he has missed open wide receivers, everybody does. But if Carson could improve one aspect of his game, it's that, hey, I think he's a little afraid to be mobile. If I can project. I don't want to say he's afraid, but I think he's hesitant at times.
You think it's because of his knee?
No. You
just think that's part of it.
I think it's more of, hey, I've got to be aware that I can't fumble the ball. I don't want to take unnecessary hits. I don't think he's being soft or anything. I just think like he's a little bit more mentally aware of what's going on around him, which is smart. The problem is that it's kind of hampered his like Willy Wonka-esque I can do anything mentality. And, you for the sake of making another Willy Wonka reference, the golden ticket should be his completion percentage and his improved accuracy. It's just not. I mean, he's been accurate since he came back. Like
he's been more accurate than he was last year, but he still makes
significantly.
But it's just like the incomplete. It's kind of like we were talking about. An offensive lineman gets 1 sack, and it's like his whole game was bad. Carson Wentz will have an incompletion. It's like a bad incompletion.
Yeah,
but because he's Carson Wentz, people don't really talk about him that way. But
a lot of people used to bash Nick Foles because Nick Foles during that 27-2 season would have a lot of would-be interceptions. Carson's had a lot of would-be interceptions in this season, and I don't feel like he's getting the flack from certain fan blogs or fans on Twitter because he is Carson Wentz and he is the patron saint of Philadelphia. But Carson hasn't played as his numbers indicate. He's been extremely accurate. He's made really good decisions at certain points, but when he falters, he really falters hard, and I think that's something to keep an eye on. They have to win this game in London. It's not a must-win, it's a have-to-win. If that makes sense, like if they come home from London, somebody better be staying in Europe.
The Jaguars look like they're trash.
I mean, but it's not even that. Like,
I know, I understand that, but like that just adds to it a little bit.
But here's
though.
the thing: the Jaguars can't score on offense. The Eagles can't actually put points. They can move the ball. They can't put points on the board. The problem is Alshon Jeffrey versus Jalen Ramsey. That's going to neutralize Alshon Jeffrey. That's like the perfect matchup for Jalen Ramsey. Zach Ertz, though, you can attack the middle of that field all day. The Jaguars can't stop it. They're terrible. You look at the 49ers, who were hopeless last year, did against them, beat them. The Jets beat them by doing that. It's a good running back game. I don't want to preview it too much, but when you look at the outlook, you're still like, wow, this Eagles team can still win this division. You're watching the Redskins and the Cowboys
beat each other up,
beat each other up and can't score either. So you have that optimism. It's just, is a team going to win this division at 7-9 or 8-8? Because this Eagles team looks like an 8-8 team at best, and maybe you trade for some. Maybe if you're Howie, you're like, I see the weakness in the division, and I make two minor trades. So I trade for a rotational defensive tackle here, and I trade for a speedy wide receiver like a Willie Snead or some,
or like J.J. Nelson or something.
Yeah, like I like that actually.
Yeah. He barely plays for the
Cardinals.
Cardinals.
Or a Jaron Brown or so, like somebody like who's a role player. And maybe that's what you see, but like you look at the Lions beat the Dolphins today. They beat the bricks off of them, and that would have been a team that I would have looked to maybe make a deal with for LeGarrette Blount or so on and so forth. So again, this is actually, it's weird. If you look at I don't want to get too sidetracked, but if you look at offenses around the league, a lot of the teams that were projected to have really good offenses, the Titans, the Bears, like there's a lot of the Falcons. There are teams that can't score. It's been very weird. And the Eagles are one of those teams. The Eagles are a team that you thought were going to put up 30 points a game. They've only done that once, and frankly, they were playing probably the second worst team in the entire league. So, again, the Eagles need to find that shot in the arm. I don't know if it's there. You know what I mean? Like I don't know.
I think people are too reliant, like we mentioned earlier. They're too reliant on this idea that a trade is going to save their season.
Just like they're relying on the fact that the division is like a dumpster.
I know you can't keep like saying all these. Yeah, I know they're struggling, but it's not that. Like it is that bad.
They lose in London. This is over. It's over. Period. Done. Because one team's going to win this NFC East matchup on Sunday night between the Cowboys and the Redskins. By the time this posts, we'll know who it is. But like, that's the thing. Somebody's going to get some space on the Eagles in this game, and if they lose two straight, which they haven't, they haven't lost hope yet. There are guys in that locker room who are still just kind of like, yeah, well, a loss is a loss. Chris Long looked flabbergasted. It was like, because he hasn't really lost, like he knows what the crap of the league is, but he's also wined and dined with kings and queens over the last two years.
I mean, Jason Kelce was so upset, and he's the most willing to talk, win or loss. Like he just like physically didn't want. Like he was like, I just can't. Like he was just so sad today, and I think that's just not a good sign.
Having a sad bearded man is like the saddest thing ever, especially if you're like a
you just imagine like Ron Burgundy when he has all the milk. Milk was a bad choice.
Yeah,
and it's just pouring down on his beard.
Yeah. And as we speak, here's another thing to be positive about. I don't mean to swing back. So the Redskins are doing well with a bunch of old bras, and Alex Smith and Adrian Peterson. That's gonna hurt them towards the end of the year.
Yeah, those guys will wear down.
The Cowboys literally have no one on offense other than Ezekiel Elliott. Like, don't get me wrong, Alan Hearns and I go way back. We're paid back from way back.
They got nobody.
But they got nobody. And the defense isn't that
Amari
great.
Cooper's not going to save them if they actually trade for him.
Yeah, he's slower than Hearns. But, again, I don't know if the shot in the arm's out there, but there is room for optimism with the way Zach Ertz and Carson Wentz and Alshon Jeffrey are playing. Blah, 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 blah. The division sucks. Blah, 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 blah. It's not time to jump yet. But this game makes London so freaking important. Like we talked about it earlier in the week. You have to go 1-1 in this 2-game stretch, and they should have won this game running away. And honestly, I think if Jake Elliott had made that field goal and it was 20-0, the Panthers wouldn't have had the spirit to come back. But the fact that you kept it at a 3-score lead. And then they had that touchdown with Curtis Samuel. I don't know, guys.
I don't know. That's the summation of this game. I don't know.
Let's finish on that note, right?
Yeah, I don't know. All right, I think that's a good spot to end on. We'll probably get a podcast for you guys either Tuesday or Wednesday before we fly out to London. Thanks for listening. If you're not subscribed already, subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. We're also on Google Play, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker. All of our stuff goes up on YouTube and iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll discuss this more later this week.